The 5 things that you should cover in your due diligence. So if you buy a property, the due diligence process when you're investigating the property before you totally commit to it is very important. So these 5 things you should keep in mind as part of your due diligence. Number 1 is the leases. So make sure when you get your leases that you carefully review them for any discrepancies that may not line up with what was put forth when the seller wanted to sell the property. And also make sure you're checking for any specific clauses that might affect you as an owner. So for instance, if you have any government-owned property where you have maybe a net lease to a government entity, oftentimes they'll have clauses in their leases that say if they lose their funding, they have an automatic out to get out of the lease and leave. Or after 10 years, maybe they have an ability to get out of that lease if they just so choose, even if it's aside from funding. So little clauses like that, you need to really look for and carefully review your leases to make sure that there's nothing there that's going to cause you grief later. Number 2 is the plans for the property. If you have building plans or general layout sketches, make sure that you have those because especially if you have actual building plans, those can be very helpful if you ever need to upgrade, add on to the property, make renovations. And oftentimes sellers will not have these documents, but reach out to your local municipality, county, township, and ask if they have them because oftentimes the building codes department may have a copy on file of that property. Number 3 is checking the environmental and the title. So a basic environmental review is really important because even if you don't think that the property you're purchasing has ever had any type of environmental issue, it's very possible that properties around it may have. And if that contamination has gone down into the groundwater and seeped into the ground underneath your property, that can be an issue. So make sure that you're just doing a general due diligence sweep of the environmental for your property as well as the ones around it with at least a desktop review or possibly a phase 1 if the property warrants it. Also checking your title and make sure there's clear title, no issue, hiccups, and surveys that do not close or any unpaid liens or encumbrance on the title. Make sure you're carefully reviewing your title insurance policy because there will oftentimes state exclusions on there that unless you actually look at that document, you may be completely aware of. I've had a seller who had a large stormwater easement on the back of his property that he didn't even know was there for 5 years because he had never actually looked at his title policy where it clearly stated it. Number 4 is service contracts. So oftentimes the investment property is going to have ongoing service contracts. Maybe it's someone who cuts the lawn. Maybe it's a roofing contractor who comes out and checks the roof every year or so to make sure it's properly serviced and cared for. So ask about any service contracts and get copies of utility bills as well as tax bills, especially if you have multiple electricity or gas meter, water meters, etc. Having actual copies of the bill can be a big benefit to you in the future as you change those and also track usage. When you have your tax bills, a note here is to look at what the actual assessment is and kind of look at the similar surrounding properties and ask yourself, does your tax bill seem in alignment with what's around it? Because sometimes you will find properties that are significantly over-assessed. And that's a wonderful opportunity for you to go in and reduce the assessment, save yourself as the owner a lot of money. Number 5 is inspections. So oftentimes you're responsible to do these as a buyer. And there are several different major components of an inspection that it's important to make sure you cover. One of the things that are often overlooked are the drain pipes for the property, because oftentimes over years, drain pipes can break and fail. Maybe tree roots grow into them. So your drain lines going from the property out to the street can be scoped to make sure that you note any major problems, and that's something that should not be left undone. And also make sure you're checking your electrical panels and electrical components. Those are major expensive items that oftentimes may be overlooked. And if you have outdated electrical components, that can be a real problem with insuring the building as well. So making sure that you're checking those, as well as the obvious ones like the roof, the HVAC service for the property, and so on. So those are 5 things to keep in mind as you do your due diligence on the property. And if you do them, you'll be a happy owner that you found out everything that you should be aware of before you close on the property. So if you buy a property, the due diligence process when you're investigating